how would one combine lifting and running in a way that allows one to get stronger and develop endurance?
If your lifting is more hypertrophy oriented, it's less important if you're coming tired. If you're talking about the muscle mass with that lighter stuff, some lifters would just get great results and some lifters would just get more endurance.
Whether or not one's talking about high volume or low volume or endurance or strength, quality.
Oh, no doubt about it.
Everything else is potentially detrimental and frankly has added a lot of confusion to the fitness literature, where people, I think, they're doing, 5 sets of 5, or do I do 10 sets of 10? And if I may, this isn't my field of expertise, but again, having been in and around it for a while, I feel like the message that keeps coming through that's going to deliver the results is every single repetition, high quality. The rest period, high quality, whatever that may be,
yes.
Walking around, shaking it off. The structuring of the program, high quality. I think people are far too haphazard and seeking the pump and soreness and some sweat so that they can have their post-workout shake. Well, I'm not trying to be...
And a selfie.
And a selfie between every set. And just kind of check the box. Even for people that aren't competitive athletes, I think there's just such an enormous range of things to be gleaned from taking one's fitness training seriously. Even the word fitness is kind of a strange word. Training seriously, right? I've never even called it a workout. I think I picked that up from Mensa. You train, I've never...
Or you practice.
Or you practice.
Yes.
I like that very much. I also like the distinction between students and clients. That's a very... These are not just labels. I think they really...
No, they're really not.
Change our cognitive frame.
In the Soviet system, when you're talking about your training session, oftentimes it was referred to as a lesson. When various qualities were developed, like strength, endurance, and so on, Verkhoshansky, for example, often mentioned that like education of qualities. And at Strong First, we talk about a practice, not a workout. And great line that was written 100 years ago by Earl Litterman in his Secrets of Strength. And back then, strength athletes understood the importance of not training on the nerve. So they understood you just train and then eventually you're going to go for a PR, but the rest of the time you don't kill yourself. And when he's describing kind of these early adherent of this high intensity, whatever, and he's referring to him, he says he has literally worked himself out. And he says that that's something that strength seeker cannot afford. So semantically, when you're trying to work yourself out, that's you're trying to exhaust yourself. Or are you trying to practice to excel, to get better at something? And that applies to any quality, because endurance very much has a skill component just like strength, because the ability to reuse the elastic properties of the tissues, the ability to relax between the contractions to restore the circulation, the ability to maintain the proper posture, and so on and so forth. These are all skills. The breathing skill, huge. Extremely important for strength, for endurance, for absolutely anything. And if you're going through this mindlessly, it's, nobody's going to get very far this way.
Okay, so while one could use resistance training in order to generate strength and endurance, you explained how to do that, there are a good number of people out there, including myself, that sometimes like to get outside for a run or to hike. As you mentioned earlier about the rucksack, I'm not such a fan of the rucksack because of being pitched forward, but I like this idea of carrying the kettlebell and switching sides. Nowadays, they also have some weight vests that are a little bit more close to the body that distribute the weight. What are your thoughts about going into the gym in order to do the strength training and then generating the endurance work elsewhere? To be blunt, like how would one combine lifting and running in a way that allows one to get stronger and develop endurance, perhaps simultaneously?
If we're talking about right now, people who are just active, people who are not athletes, there are several things they need to keep in mind. One is the relative timing of strength work and endurance work. If the strength exercises that you're doing are primarily neural adaptations, is what you're targeting, which means lower repetitions, heavier stuff, then it's important to be fresh when you're doing the exercise. It's not really, doesn't matter as much what happens afterwards. So which means that you could do some heavy deadlifts, and then a few hours later you can go for a hike. On the other hand, if you're lifting is more hypertrophy oriented. It's less important if you come in tired. It's okay even if you just hiked in the morning and then you went, did your curls. But afterwards, for 36, 48 hours, it's ideally to restrict endurance exercise. So because you're really going to have a massive conflict right there, and it's not a good idea to do that. If you're doing our preferred work of, let's say, sets of 5 reps again, they address both endurance and strength. Well, I guess you better keep a window on both ends right there. There's always a conflict. Thomas Sowell said there are no solutions. They're only compromises. So you just have to decide which way you want to compromise. But that separation in time really does help. The other thing is spending different times when you focus on one thing versus the other. So the next 2 months you're going to spend on hitting your strength hard, and you're just going to do 2 hikes a week just for your health, just to maintain. And then summer rolls around, and you put your lifting on the back burner. You lift less, not necessarily lighter, just less, and you spend a lot more time outdoors and do these different things. Keeping in mind also the duration of training. So the longer your training session is of any kind, the more you are triggering adaptations that are more in favor of endurance. So your cortisol level goes up, and there are some other things that do happen that drive you towards endurance as opposed to strength. So even in your strength training, don't make the sessions too long.
What's too long?
It's really hard to know at this point. In the Soviet weightlifting practice, the top guys would spend 2 and 2.5 hours. For them, that seemed appropriate. But then again, don't forget at that point they're juicing. And in the pre-steroid eras, those times are shorter. And this is one of the differences in steroids, by the way. That's in your training when you use steroids or not. As I mentioned earlier, Soviets established the correlation with the volume of lifting and muscle mass. That's one thing. But they also established correlation between volume of lifting at 80% or higher and strength. And the correlation is very strong, 0.84. However, if you're talking about the muscle mass with that lighter stuff, some lifters would just get great results and some lifters would just get more endurance. And they found that guys who are juicing, they can keep doing higher volumes and still keep getting more muscular. But the guys who are clean, they're just not able to do that. So trial and error, probably like Marty Gallagher says, fill an hour. I think that's a safe guideline, fill an hour.
Yeah, I like the fill an hour. I don't think I've ever spent more than an hour of actual work in the gym, maybe 75 minutes or so. I notice if I train longer than that, I pay a serious price in terms of post-exercise fatigue later in the day. I'd actually like to talk about this concept. I looked it up before sitting down today. There's a little bit of literature starting to emerge, not as much as I would like, about post-exercise cholinergic depletion.